paper plate, a juice box, and a seat she didn't mean to take. Andrea Bowen wasn't invited to the fancy food event. She only showed up hoping for leftovers someone might offer to take home. She didn't expect to sit at a reserved table. And she definitely didn't expect the quiet boy beside her to be the son of Stephen Culp, one of the most powerful CEOs in the country. What began as an awkward mistake turned into a connection no one saw coming. And when she returned a lost notebook with a name but no title, she unknowingly walked into the office of the man whose life was about to be changed forever. What followed wasn't a fairy tale, but it was something softer, stronger, real. Before we dive into the story, comment below where you're watching from. Enjoy the story, everyone. Andrea Bowen didn't plan to go inside. She stood just outside the glass doors of the Lenox Pavilion, clutching her fraying backpack, the cold biting through the sleeves of her second-hand coat. Through the windows, she could see rows of tables draped in white cloth, trays of steaming food, and people with name tags sipping from wine glasses. Everything gleamed. The silverware, the heels, the watch bands. She didn't belong here. But then again, she didn't belong anywhere lately. A volunteer in a yellow vest passed by, handing out small flyers that read, "Taste of Lenox, a night of generosity and gourmet." Andrea wasn't here for gourmet. She was here because someone told her there might be leftovers after the event. The kind they throw away, her friend Marley had whispered. But if you ask nice, sometimes they let you take a plate home. Andrea didn't expect a plate, just maybe a roll, something warm, something to share with her sister later that night. Emily had finals the next day, and there wasn't much left in the fridge besides a half-empty jar of peanut butter and 2 aging apples. She walked toward the side entrance, trying not to make eye contact with the volunteers. She wasn't stealing anything. She just wanted to warm up, maybe blend in for 5 minutes, maybe act like she belonged. A man in a navy apron stood near the back door, typing on a tablet. He didn't stop her. No one did. Inside, the air was thick with roasted herbs and melted butter. Andrea's stomach clenched so hard it made her wince. She kept her head down and moved along the edge of the room, trying to look like she knew where she was going. There were round tables everywhere, most full, some with small paper signs that read, "Reserved." She spotted one in the far corner, half hidden by a pillar. No sign, no one guarding it, just 2 empty chairs, or so she thought. She sat down quickly, pulling her coat tighter around her as if to make herself smaller. A moment later, she realized she wasn't alone. To her right sat a boy, maybe 9 or 10, pale, quiet, with hair falling over his eyes and a hood pulled up around his ears. He had a plate in front of him, untouched. Salmon, asparagus, something creamy in a ramekin. His juice box had a straw but was still sealed. Andrea stiffened. "Oh, I didn't mean to. Is this seat taken?" The boy looked at her. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. But he shook his head, once. She hesitated. "Are you waiting for someone?" He shrugged. Andrea glanced at the food, then at the boy. "You don't like fish either, huh?" This time his lip twitched, almost a smile. "Tastes like wet Band-Aids," she whispered. He snorted, soft and sudden, then nodded in agreement. "I'm Andrea," she said, a little lighter now. "Adam," he replied quietly. She blinked. His voice was soft but certain. No slur, no shyness, just a name, given plainly. "Nice to meet you, Adam." Silence. Then he asked, "Are you supposed to be here?" Andrea's breath caught. She looked down, embarrassed. "No," she admitted. But I'm not stealing anything. I just needed to sit. He nodded like he understood, then pushed his plate toward her. You can have mine. I don't want it. Andrea hesitated. I'm okay, really? He shrugged again. It's going to get thrown out anyway. Something about the way he said it, like he'd seen it happen too many times, made her slowly reach for the roll on the side of the plate. Thanks, she said. Adam looked at her as she took a bite. Then, out of nowhere, asked, what would you name a dragon if it was scared of fire? Andrea chewed slowly, then swallowed. Marshmallow. Adam grinned, and that's when Stephen Culp saw her. From across the room, standing behind a table with city officials and shareholders, the CEO of Culp Nutrition International watched his son laughing for the first time in weeks, maybe months. Stephen had only agreed to come tonight because the event was technically under his brand's umbrella. Make an appearance, his assistant had said. It'll be good press. Bring Adam if you want. No cameras. But when he arrived, Adam had immediately wandered to the far corner and sat down alone. Something he'd done more and more since Claire died. Stephen had let him. Sometimes Adam just needed quiet. Now, however, Stephen was frozen. A girl, no, a young woman, sat at Adam's table. She didn't look like the others in the room. No designer bag. No badge. Her boots were worn at the toes. Her coat had a missing button. But she was talking to Adam. More importantly, he was talking to her. Stephen stepped closer, weaving through the crowd, excusing himself from meaningless small talk. As he approached, he heard her say, I think dragons are just misunderstood lizards with ambition. Adam nearly spit out his juice laughing. Stephen stopped 2 steps away. Andrea turned her head slightly, then froze. The man in the charcoal suit was tall, composed, the kind of man people made way for without thinking. His eyes were cold, not cruel, just practiced. I didn't mean to sit here, Andrea said quickly, standing up. I didn't know this was reserved. Stephen didn't say anything for a moment, then looked at Adam. She's okay, Adam said quietly. I like her. Andrea blinked. Stephen turned to her. You're not with the event? No, she admitted. You're not press. No, sir. You ate the bread. Andrea flushed. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause trouble. Stephen tilted his head. You're not causing trouble. Adam tugged on Andrea's sleeve. Do you have a phone? She looked down at him. Yes. Can I text you sometime? About the dragon thing? She smiled despite herself. Sure, but only if you promise not to send me fire emojis. Deal. Stephen watched as she tore off a corner of a napkin and wrote her number, folding it in half and handing it to Adam. Adam tucked it in his pocket like a treasure. Andrea turned back to Stephen. Thank you for not yelling. He raised an eyebrow. Did you expect me to? People usually do. With that, she slipped past him, disappearing into the crowd. Stephen looked down at his son. Who was that? Adam shrugged. Just someone who didn't make me feel weird. Stephen looked again at the space she'd left behind, the empty chair, the half-eaten roll, and something he couldn't quite name settled in his chest. The napkin sat folded on Adam's nightstand, untouched. Stephen had half expected his son to lose it, crumple it up, or forget the girl's name by morning. But no, it was placed carefully next to Adam's favorite book and the little flashlight he sometimes slept with when the shadows felt too loud. Stephen glanced at it again as he passed by the doorway. Still there. He leaned against the doorframe. You're up late. Adam was sitting cross-legged on his bed, sketching something in his notebook. Can't sleep. Nightmares? Adam shook his head. Just thinking. Stephen stepped inside. The soft hum of the humidifier buzzed in the background. Adam's room wasn't like most rich kids' spaces. He didn't care about gadgets or toys. Just books, markers, a globe that still had stickers from his mom labeling the countries she wanted to take him to. "What are you drawing?" Stephen asked. Adam turned the notebook around. A dragon, not fierce, not roaring, but curled up like it was trying to hide from its own tail. Stephen swallowed. "That's really good." She said dragons are misunderstood lizards with ambition. Stephen nodded slowly. "Andrea." Adam looked up. "She didn't ask who you were." "I noticed. She didn't try to impress you." "That too." Adam paused, then added, "She just talked to me like I was normal." Stephen sat down on the edge of the bed. He didn't know how to respond to that. Not really. He'd spent months, no years, trying to make Adam feel safe. Therapy, private tutors, gentle parenting experts. Still, the boy rarely spoke to anyone outside the house. Now, after a single conversation with a girl in a thrifted coat, he was sketching dragons and smiling at juicebox jokes. Stephen rubbed a hand over his jaw. "You want to text her?" Adam nodded. "If that's okay." Stephen hesitated for a heartbeat, then picked up his phone and dialed the number from the napkin. He didn't call, just opened a blank message thread. Adam dictated. What would a fire-shy dragon name his pet snail? Stephen raised an eyebrow. "That's what you're starting with?" "She'll get it." He hit send. Across town, Andrea was sitting cross-legged on her twin mattress, spooning cereal from a plastic bowl, when her phone buzzed. She glanced down and blinked. Unknown number. What would a fire-shy dragon name his pet snail? A beat. Then she grinned and typed back. Sizzle, obviously. The reply came faster than she expected. Sizzle is now canon. Thank you. Andrea stared at the screen for a moment. She hadn't expected him to actually text. Kids were unpredictable that way. But this didn't feel like randomness. It felt intentional. She leaned back against the wall. The heater made a strange clunking noise, as it always did when the temperature dropped. In the next room, Emily was studying at the kitchen table, highlighting vocabulary words with 3 different colors and mumbling them out loud. Andrea typed again. "Tell Sizzle he better not eat the storybooks. I'll quiz him later." No reply this time. Not right away. But that was fine. The conversation had already made her night better. The next morning, Stephen found Adam at the breakfast table already dressed. Something that hadn't happened in weeks. He had his tablet open and a sketch in front of him. A dragon reading to a snail on a beanbag. "Sending it to her?" Stephen asked. Adam nodded. "Can I?" Stephen leaned down and kissed his son's hair. "Go ahead." The thread of messages became a quiet ritual. Every couple of days, not too often, Adam would send something silly, and Andrea would respond with equal parts nonsense and insight. He told her about his favorite fantasy books. She told him how she once drew a full comic book on napkins while waiting for a dentist appointment. Sometimes the conversations were funny, sometimes weirdly philosophical. Stephen didn't interfere, but he read every one. Not out of control, out of curiosity. This girl, this stranger, had a way of drawing Adam out that therapy had never managed. She didn't overcompensate, didn't baby him. She talked to him like someone who expected him to speak for himself. That mattered. It was a week later when everything changed. Andrea was working a double shift, cafe in the morning, local bookstore in the afternoon, when she noticed the boy-shaped shadow in the children's section. She was reshelving some picture books when a soft voice said, "Hi!" She turned, startled. Adam, hoodie sleeves pulled over his hands, hair still too long, and beside him, Stephen. She blinked. "You again," she said, surprised. Adam held up a small book. "We just bought this. It reminded me of Sizzle." Andrea laughed. "Let me guess. Dragons who like poetry." Stephen cleared his throat. He insisted we stop by the bookstore on the way back from lunch. "I didn't know this was where you worked," Adam added. "I didn't know you shopped here," she replied. Stephen looked around. "Nice place." Andrea gave a small shrug. "Smells like dust and dreams." That made Adam smile again. Stephen reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a plain white envelope. "This is probably going to sound weird," he said, "but I wanted to give you this." Andrea hesitated. "What is it?" "Just a thank you." She opened the envelope and pulled out a gift card to the bookstore. Not extravagant, but enough to matter. Enough to make her heart do that strange twist of pride and panic. "I didn't do anything," she said, trying to hand it back. Stephen shook his head. "You did more than you know." Andrea hesitated, then tucked the card into her apron pocket. "Fine, but only because dragons appreciate small gestures." Adam beamed. Stephen looked at her for a long moment, then said, "Do you ever take lunch breaks?" Andrea raised an eyebrow. "Depends on the day." "Let me buy you a coffee sometime." Andrea blinked. "Like a thank you coffee? If you want to call it that." She looked at Adam. "Is your dad always this formal?" Adam shrugged. "Only when he's nervous." Stephen groaned. Andrea grinned. "Coffee sounds good." Stephen didn't usually feel nervous. He chaired billion-dollar boardrooms. He gave keynotes without flinching. He once negotiated a transatlantic merger while watching his son perform in a school play via livestream. But sitting across from Andrea Bowen at a tiny cafe 2 blocks from the bookstore, sipping black coffee while she stirred 3 packets of sugar into hers, he felt like a man completely out of his depth. "So," she said, glancing at him over the rim of her chipped mug, "what exactly do you do, Stephen Culp?" He paused. This moment had come faster than he'd expected. "I work in food manufacturing." Andrea raised a brow. "You make granola bars?" "Something like that." She took a sip. "You're not a food critic. You don't look like you critique basil for a living." Stephen smiled just slightly. "No, I just run a company." "What kind of company?" "The kind that builds things behind the scenes. Recipes, distribution, innovation." Andrea squinted at him. "You're being vague on purpose." "I am." She leaned back. "Let me guess. You're either incredibly rich or incredibly paranoid." "Both," he said without missing a beat. That made her laugh. Stephen found himself watching her. Really watching. There was a kind of rawness to her that made him uneasy in the best way. She didn't dress to impress. She didn't fidget or flatter. She simply was present, alert, quick with her words and sharper with her eyes. "You know," she said after a moment, "this is the first coffee I've had in a week that wasn't reheated in a microwave. So, thanks." Stephen tilted his head. "You work a lot, I take it." 3 jobs. None of them glamorous." She took another sip. "Morning cafe, afternoon bookstore, night shift dishwasher at a call center cafeteria on weekends." He blinked. "That's intense." It's survival, she said plainly. It's not a sob story, just life. Stephen didn't respond, not because he didn't want to, but because there was nothing to say that wouldn't sound hollow. He didn't know what it meant to juggle 3 jobs. Not anymore. Andrea leaned her elbows on the table. So let me ask you something. Okay. Why are you here? He hesitated. Because my son asked me to. She blinked. Really? He wanted to see you again. Said you were the only adult who didn't make him feel like a project. Andrea swallowed hard. That's a lot. Stephen nodded. He talks about you more than he talks about anyone. Andrea looked away for a moment, suddenly unsure. You okay? He asked. I'm not used to matching like that, she said quietly. Stephen looked at her, really looked. There was something in her voice, something worn but unbroken, like a thread that had frayed but never snapped. You do, he said. That was when her phone buzzed. Andrea pulled it out, glanced at the screen, then stood up fast. I have to go. My sister. She forgot her study packet, and I promised I'd drop it off before her test. Stephen stood too. Can I give you a ride? No, her voice was firm. Thank you, but I'll take the bus. He nodded once. As she hurried out the door, he watched her go, then turned back to his empty cup. Not used to matching. That line stuck with him the whole ride home. 2 days later, Andrea's shift at the bookstore ended early. She tucked her apron into her bag, grabbed her coat, and headed outside. As she stepped onto the sidewalk, something crunched under her boot. A notebook, well-worn, spiral-bound, the kind kids doodle in. She picked it up, brushing off dirt. The cover read A. Culp in messy pen. Inside were sketches, dragons, snails, castles, and one drawing of a girl reading a book to a dragon wearing earmuffs. Andrea's heart stopped. She flipped to the front page. No contact info, no phone number, just a sticky note with an address scribbled on it. An office building downtown. She bit her lip. She could have waited to return it, could have just texted Adam, but something told her this mattered more than that. She took the subway. The building was a towering glass structure. Andrea felt out of place the second she walked through the doors. The lobby gleamed. A receptionist in a headset looked up. Can I help you? Andrea held up the notebook. I think a kid named Adam dropped this. His name's on the front. The receptionist blinked. Mr. Culp is in a meeting, but I can leave it on his desk. I'm not here for Mr. Culp, Andrea interrupted gently. I'm here for Adam. He left this. The woman paused, then said, They're both upstairs, in the boardroom. Andrea froze. They both. Her fingers tightened around the notebook. Stephen wasn't a mid-level food manufacturer. He owned the building, and she'd been drinking coffee with a man who likely had private planes and annual earnings larger than her city school budget. She said nothing, just handed over the notebook and walked out the door. That night, she didn't respond to Adam's messages. Not where did you go? Not Sizzle says hi. Not even I drew you a pigeon with a crown. Please respond. She read them, then turned her phone face down. She didn't know what hurt more, that Stephen had lied, or that she hadn't thought to ask. Andrea didn't sleep that night. The walls of their apartment were too thin. Emily's quiet study music bled through the wall. Pipes clanked in the ceiling like an uneven heartbeat. Her phone buzzed more than once. A message from a coworker, a bank alert, and another from Adam. This one simply said, You don't have to talk to my dad, but please don't disappear. I still need to know how Sizzle wins the tournament. She read it twice, then 3 more times, and still didn't reply. She wasn't angry. Not exactly. She knew Stephen hadn't technically lied. He just never told her the truth. But that omission sat heavy in her chest like a weight she couldn't name. She had trusted the ease between them, the way he looked at her like she wasn't a burden. And now she couldn't shake the image of that glittering lobby. The woman at the front desk saying, "Mr. Culp is in a meeting," like he was someone who lived behind tinted windows and untouchable doors. Andrea pulled the blanket tighter around herself and stared at the ceiling until morning. Stephen didn't expect the silence. When Adam told him Andrea hadn't replied to any messages, not even about the pigeon with a cape, which normally earned at least a laugh emoji, something in his chest pinched. "She saw The Office," Adam said quietly. Stephen nodded. "She knows." Adam looked down at the floor. "You didn't tell her." "I wanted to," Stephen said honestly. "But I also didn't want her to look at me differently." "You mean like everyone else does?" Stephen winced. "Maybe I ruined it," Adam said, small. "Maybe she thinks I tricked her." "No," Stephen said, gently but firmly. "You didn't do anything wrong." He reached over and ruffled his son's hair. "I'll fix it," he promised. Andrea didn't expect the knock. It came mid-afternoon, just as she was finishing her shift at the bookstore. She looked up from the register and nearly dropped the receipt in her hand. Stephen stood at the entrance, wearing jeans and a plain hoodie, holding a small paper bag. No security, no entourage, just him. She walked to the front slowly. "You shouldn't be here." "I figured you'd say that," he said calmly. "But I didn't want to text, or email, or send flowers to your job like some awkward apology cliché." She crossed her arms. "Then what is this?" He held out the paper bag. "Muffins." Andrea blinked. "Adam said muffins fix things," Stephen added, a little sheepish. Andrea exhaled slowly, unsure whether to laugh or cry. "Why didn't you tell me who you were?" "Because I didn't want to be Stephen Culp to you," he said. "I wanted to be a dad. A guy with a son who liked drawing dragons. A man who doesn't sleep much and drinks terrible coffee." She didn't take the muffins. "I'm not mad," she said finally. "I just feel stupid." "You're not. I sat across from you, made jokes about microwave tea, and you let me. You let me think we were on the same page." Stephen's voice softened. "Maybe we were. Maybe not financially, not publicly, but in other ways." She raised an eyebrow. "You work 3 jobs to protect your sister," he said. "You talk to my son like he matters, not because he's rich or pitiful, but because he's interesting. You laugh at silly drawings and challenge my views on the world without even meaning to. You see people, Andrea. Not masks, not brands, just people." Silence. Then, reluctantly, she reached for the muffins. Blueberry, half blueberry, half banana nut. Adam couldn't decide. She smirked, just slightly. "Of course." Stephen rubbed the back of his neck. "He misses you." Andrea looked down at the bag. "I miss him too." "Then come by," he said. "Not for me. For him. He made you something. Said he won't show it to anyone else." She hesitated. Stephen didn't push. He just nodded and stepped back toward the door. "Whether you show up or not, thank you for making him feel normal again." Andrea watched him leave. Only when the door closed did she realize she was holding the bag against her chest like it meant something. Maybe it did. The next afternoon, Andrea knocked on the office door that had once made her stomach twist with nerves. This time, she came in through the back, the service elevator, the one the delivery people used. No marble lobby. No security desk. A receptionist smiled when she entered. "He's waiting inside." She stepped into the break room, a surprisingly cozy space tucked behind the corporate polish. Adam sat at a table with a stack of printer paper and a sketchbook in front of him. He looked up. "You came." Andrea smiled. "Of course I did." He held up the paper. On it was a drawing of Sizzle, the snail sitting on a throne made of cookie crumbs, with a crown made of toothpicks. Andrea gasped. "He won the tournament." Adam grinned. "He beat the fire-breathing armadillo in round 4. Classic twist." Stephen stood near the coffee machine, silent but present. Andrea met his eyes briefly. This time there was no tension, no need for explanation, just quiet acknowledgement. Later, as she got up to leave, Adam handed her something else, a folded piece of notebook paper. On the front, in shaky handwriting, "If you're mad at my dad, that's okay. But I still want to know how the pigeon story ends." Andrea felt her throat tighten. She crouched beside him. "I'll tell you, but only if you promise me one thing." "What?" "You keep drawing pigeons in capes. The world needs them." Adam nodded solemnly. As Andrea walked to the door, Stephen followed. "I'm not asking for anything," he said quietly. "Not forgiveness, not explanation. I just don't want you to disappear." Andrea looked at him, eyes calm. "Then don't give me a reason to." He nodded. She left, but the paper stayed tucked in her coat pocket the whole way home. And that night, for the first time in a long while, she started writing again. Not an essay, not a job application. A story about a pigeon who remembered the girl who believed in him first. The first thing Andrea noticed was the hallway. It was narrower than she expected, painted a soft yellow that reminded her of melted butter. Not the sleek marble corridors of a high-rise or the sterile gray of most corporate offices. This was different. At the far end of the hall was a door with a small sign taped to it. Youth Story Lab, Pilot Room. In smaller letters, Test Zone. Enter with imagination. Andrea smiled before she even touched the handle. It had been 3 weeks since she returned the notebook. Since the muffins. Since Adam's pigeon drawing landed on her dresser like a talisman. Since she said yes, not to Stephen, not exactly, but to something that might be real. Stephen had offered her a job. Not a position. Possibility. "Help us build something," he'd said. "For kids who don't feel like they belong anywhere." It wasn't pity. It wasn't charity. It was her story turned outward. And now here she was. She pushed open the door. Inside, a group of kids were sitting in a half-circle, laughing. Some were drawing. Others were reading aloud in silly voices. At the center of it all sat Adam, a paper crown on his head and a stuffed dragon in his lap. "Miss Andrea," one of the girls yelled. Andrea stepped fully into the room. "Hey there, team. Did the dragon win today's spelling bee?" "Barely," Adam said. "He forgot how to spell lasagna." "Tragic," Andrea replied, dropping her bag. "We'll hold a retraining seminar after juice boxes." The kids cheered. She spent the next hour helping them build cardboard castles and write postcards from imaginary towns. When the room quieted for a reading break, Adam slipped into the seat beside her. He didn't say anything. He just handed her a folded sketch. Pigeon, this time holding a scroll. The title read, Chapter 2, What the Mayor Built. Andrea touched the edge of the page gently. "Did I miss Chapter 1? Adam smiled. "That's the part we already lived." She blinked away the sudden warmth in her eyes. Stephen stood in the doorway, watching them. Coffee in hand, sleeves rolled up, eyes softer than Andrea remembered from that first day. He didn't interrupt. When the session ended, Andrea stayed behind to clean up. Stephen joined her, silently folding beanbags and refilling marker bins. "I haven't said thank you yet," she said after a long pause. "For what?" "For making space." He looked at her. "You made it matter." They stood side by side, surrounded by cardboard towers and crayon murals, and a whiteboard with a half-erased list of dragon-approved snack ideas. Andrea crossed her arms. "You're good with them. The kids, I mean." "I wasn't at first," he admitted. "I was just trying to build something that didn't feel like another charity line item." "You built a place," she said. "Now they fill it." He nodded. "That's the part one didn't expect." She turned to him. "And what did you expect?" "Resistance," he said honestly. "Suspicion. Maybe even failure." "Sounds like a CEO." He smiled faintly. "And you?" "I expected to leave after 2 weeks." "And yet?" She picked up the pigeon sketch again. "And yet here we are." They shared a moment then, one that didn't need to be named. Not romantic, not yet, but steady, trusting. As they stepped out into the hallway, Andrea paused. "I should probably tell you something." Stephen raised an eyebrow. "I'm not good with fancy things. Suits, titles, giant buildings that smell like polished steel. I grew up in a 4th-floor walk-up with 1 bathroom and 6 relatives. I get nervous when people hold doors open too long." Stephen considered her words. "What if I promised not to hold the door?" Andrea smiled. "Then I might be willing to walk beside you." Later that evening, Andrea returned home to find Emily sitting on the floor, surrounded by open textbooks and a frozen pizza on the counter. Her younger sister looked up. "You're glowing. That's weird. Are you dying?" Andrea laughed. "Maybe." Emily squinted. "Is this about the kid or the CEO?" "Both," Andrea said, setting down her bag. "But mostly, it's about the pigeons." Emily rolled her eyes. "God help me." The next week, Stephen invited Andrea to a soft launch event for the Foundation's new literacy wing. She hesitated, not because she didn't want to go, but because the idea of standing beside him in public made something clench inside her. She wasn't polished. She didn't own a dress that zipped all the way up without a safety pin. But Adam insisted. "It's not fancy," he said. "Just people. Just stories." So she came. The event was quiet, intimate. No press. No podiums. Just a circle of chairs, donated books stacked like towers, and lemonade served in mason jars. Stephen introduced her as our story coach. Andrea blushed. Adam added, "She's also the mayor of pigeons." Laughter followed. But something else lingered in the air that night. Not spotlight, but belonging. After everyone left, Stephen walked her to the street corner. The night air was cool. Andrea zipped her jacket halfway. He looked at her. "You don't owe me anything, you know." "I know, but I hope you'll keep showing up." Andrea tilted her head. "That sounds dangerously close to asking for consistency." "Guilty." She studied him for a long, quiet moment, then reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a folded napkin. On it, a doodle of a dragon and a snail, side by side. Stephen took it gently. "From you?" he asked. "No," she said, stepping closer. "From the girl who sat at the wrong table and accidentally found her way to the right people." Stephen smiled. And this time it wasn't guarded or rehearsed, just real. The first snowfall arrived quietly. It wasn't dramatic or cinematic, just soft flakes settling on city rooftops like powdered sugar on overbaked memories. Andrea stood at the window of the foundation's reading room, watching the street blur into gray and white. Behind her, Adam was sprawled across the floor on a pile of pillows, building something out of popsicle sticks and double-sided tape. "It's a pigeon perch/teleporter," he explained. Andrea turned from the window, smiling. "Naturally, all mayors need one." He looked up. "Can we read after? You pick the book." As she walked toward him, the door creaked open. Stephen stepped inside. His scarf was dusted with snow, his hair slightly windblown. He held a paper bag in one hand and a slightly crooked smile in the other. "Emergency delivery," he announced. Andrea raised an eyebrow. "Muffins again?" "Cookies, actually." Adam said it was a double chocolate kind of day. Adam grinned from the floor. "Because I passed my math test." Stephen handed the bag to Andrea. "We're celebrating." She peeked inside. The cookies were still warm. "This is dangerously close to bribery." He shrugged. "Bribery's only bad when it doesn't come with frosting." Adam snorted. The three of them settled into a rhythm that had, over the past few weeks, become quietly familiar. They read. They laughed. They brainstormed a story about a cat with social anxiety who saved a kingdom using a spoon and a harmonica. And when the lights dimmed in the early evening and most of the staff had gone home, Andrea found herself lingering in the kitchen, refilling mugs and watching Stephen lean against the counter like he wasn't a man who ran half the city. He looked at her, not through her. "I had a meeting today," he said softly. "One of those boardroom things with graphs and cold coffee and people trying to sound more important than they feel." Andrea smirked. "Sounds awful." It was. But the whole time, I kept thinking, I'd rather be here. Her smile faded a little. Not in disappointment, in surprise. "You'd rather be in a kid-filled building with juice box stains and hand-drawn pigeons?" "Yes," he said simply. Andrea turned toward the window again. The snow was still falling. Cars passed like quiet ghosts. "I used to hate snow," she said, "because it meant the heat might go out or the bus might skip our stop. Everything got harder." Stephen was silent. "But now," she continued, "I kind of love it." "Why?" "Because it slows everything down, forces you to pay attention, forces people to notice what's warm." He stepped closer, not invading, just arriving. "And what's warm right now?" She looked at him, eyes honest. "This." Later that night, Andrea walked home with a plastic bag full of leftover cookies and a drawing from Adam rolled up in her coat pocket. She entered the apartment quietly. Emily was already asleep, a half-finished study guide still open beside her pillow. Andrea set the bag on the counter and sat down on the couch, exhausted but light. She reached into her coat for the drawing, unrolled it. It showed 3 figures, a dragon, a pigeon, and a girl with a scarf holding a notebook like a sword. Above them, "The real heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they tell stories." She pressed the paper to her chest and closed her eyes. The next morning, Andrea arrived early at the foundation. Snow still clung to the sidewalk edges. The inside smelled like cinnamon and crayons. On her desk was a small box. No name, no label, just a note. "For your next chapter. SC." Inside, a set of brand new art markers. The expensive kind she'd always admired but never dared touch. Andrea exhaled. That day, She told the kids a story about a city where pigeons taught humans how to rebuild what was broken. When one of the girls asked, "Is it a real story?" Andrea smiled and said, "The truest ones always sound made up." Stephen didn't say anything for a week. He didn't have to. They saw each other daily, shared glances, exchanged silence, the kind that didn't demand words to feel full. But one evening, as they were cleaning up spilled glitter and rogue feathers after a storytelling craft session, he paused beside her. "Dinner?" he asked. Andrea looked up. "You mean outside this building?" He nodded. "Just us. No muffins. No stories. Just you and me." She hesitated. "What if it ruins what we have? What if it deepens it?" She looked down, then up. "Okay." They went to a tiny restaurant 2 blocks from her apartment. Nothing grand. No reservation. Andrea wore a soft green sweater with a frayed cuff. Stephen wore the same coat she'd seen him in a dozen times before. No one looked twice at them. They were just two people eating pasta and laughing about how dragons would survive in modern traffic. When the check came, she tried to reach for it. He raised an eyebrow. "You'll offend Sizzle." She laughed. "Fine, but I'm leaving the tip." "Deal." They walked home slowly. Snow had begun to fall again, dusting the streets in softness. Outside her building, they paused. Stephen looked at her. "I don't want to rush anything." "I know, but I want to keep walking in your direction." Andrea touched his sleeve. "Then don't stop." He leaned down and kissed her gently. Not hungry, not desperate, just present. And that was enough. That night, Andrea texted Adam. "Sizzle now has a girlfriend. Her name is Crumble. She's made of cheese." Adam replied instantly, "Crumble forever. Tell my dad I said thanks." Andrea smiled into her pillow. The snow kept falling, and the world felt softer than it had in a long, long time. The Story Lab's official relaunch happened on a Saturday. No cameras, no sponsors, no press. Just dozens of kids running through yellow-painted hallways with paper crowns and hand-labeled badges that read things like Dragon Trainer, Mayor of Pigeons, and Professional Cookie Critic. Andrea stood by the back window, clipboard in hand, her scarf tucked into a flannel shirt, watching chaos with a calm she never used to have. The room smelled like markers, cinnamon rolls, and construction paper, her favorite combination. Stephen walked in late, on purpose. He didn't want to steal the moment. This wasn't his show. It hadn't been for a while. Adam was perched on the reading couch in the corner, holding up a homemade flag that said, "Sizzle for President." Andrea laughed when she saw it. "I thought he was already mayor." "He's expanding his career," Adam said seriously. Stephen joined her near the window, hands tucked in his coat pockets. "You've made something real here. You helped." "No," he said. "I just opened the door. You built the room." Andrea smiled at that, the kind of smile that lingers behind the eyes. "And now, I was hoping you'd keep letting me stay in it." She looked at him. "Even if there are glue sticks everywhere? I've learned to love the glitter." Later that evening, long after the last kid had left, after the folding chairs had been stacked and the cookies reduced to crumbs, Andrea and Stephen stood outside the building under the quiet hum of a flickering streetlight. Snow hadn't returned yet, but the air held that waiting stillness. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a familiar item. The napkin Andrea had scribbled her number on months ago. It had been laminated, preserved like a relic. "You kept it," Adam insisted, said it's what started everything. Andrea touched it gently. He's not wrong. Stephen looked at her. Do you ever think about that night? All the time, she said. What if you'd sat at a different table? I didn't, she said simply. He stepped closer. And what if we built more than just a story lab? Andrea blinked. What do you mean? Stephen reached out, slowly, cupping her hand with both of his. I mean, a real life. Not fancy, not fast, just honest. With dragons and pigeons and double chocolate cookies. She laughed, heart catching in her throat. You're proposing with baked goods metaphors? I'm proposing hope, he said, and showing up every single day. Andrea didn't answer with words. She leaned in and kissed him, soft, certain, grounded. The kind of kiss that doesn't ask for promises, just presence. 3 months later, they moved into a new apartment. Not a penthouse, not a mansion, just a wide, warm corner unit with sunlit floors, built-in bookshelves, and a tiny nook by the window where Adam insisted on building the official headquarters of Sizzle and Crumble Publishing. Andrea still worked at the foundation, now as director of programs. Her business card read, Andrea Bowen, story coach, chaos coordinator, mayor whisperer. Stephen took a step back from the corporate grind. He still ran his empire, but now with longer weekends and more frequent lunch breaks spent surrounded by giggling kids and glitter explosions. And Adam? He smiled more. He laughed easily. He still talked to his plush dragon before bed, and still sent Andrea napkin sketches when he missed her on busy days. One Sunday morning, the three of them sat around the kitchen table, steam rising from mugs of tea and coffee, while Adam read aloud from a new short story he'd written. The girl who told the dragon he didn't need fire to be brave. Andrea wiped her eyes before the last line. Stephen held her hand under the table. They didn't need labels. They had stories, and a family, built one page at a time.